Hello, welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Today, we're talking about an ancient Chinese text. It's also one of the principal texts of Taoism, and that is Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Let me start off by saying, if you have even the slightest interest in philosophy, even the most minute interest in philosophy, read this book. Read Tao Te Ching. I mean, this book is chock full of so much philosophy, so many ideas, so many concepts that are so applicable to life today that you can apply and that are they're just so meaningful to just life. It's amazing. And the book is not long at all. I mean, just let me show you. The book is not long and it's also written in verse. So you can easily read this in under an hour. But you could spend your whole lifetime studying the concepts that are brought up in this book. It's really remarkable when you think about it, considering how ancient this book is. And let's talk about how ancient it is. Scholars have come to the consensus that is written in about the 6th century BC. Now, there's still a little bit of debate in that, but that's pretty much the overall agreement, the 6th century BC. Also, the author of this book, Lao Tzu, is also up to contention. Scholars are still up in the air about that, but most scholars have settled on, Lao Tzu's probably the one that wrote this. Lao Tzu was a record keeper for an ancient ruler who ruled at that time in China. Another critical point about this edition of the book, that it's translated by Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell did a controversial translation of this book. Because rather than him creating a direct ancient Chinese to English translation of the book, he instead focused on the meaning and the concepts. He's like, okay, how can I make this book easily accessible to the modern reader without bogging them down in old school language? So, he took some liberties here and there. He changed a little bit of things, not too much, but he did change a few things around in the effort of trying to get the modern English reader to understand the concepts the book is trying to tell. Now, there's quite a few scholars that don't like this approach. They're like, okay, no, you need to do your best to do the research and get into the ancient Chinese text and more directly translate it from the ancient Chinese text to the English version. So by doing what Stephen Mitchell did, maybe some of the meaning is lost because it's not a direct translation. There's some modern terms that are used that weren't terms that were used back then, or things that didn't even exist that are kind of brought up in this book, such as examples that he kind of spun to make it more applicable to the modern day. Some scholars are like, okay, that some of the meaning is lost. However, I like this translation. I like Stephen Mitchell's translation of Tao Te Ching. The reason is that I think Stephen Mitchell addresses just a fundamental problem in philosophy, and why a lot of people aren't into philosophy is sometimes philosophy books can be overly complicated. Philosophy addresses very complicated issues, and you have to get that complicated sometimes. But sometimes the language that's used by philosophers can be simplified. It really can, and sometimes the language is overly complicated. And I think some of the old school philosophers focused a little bit more on, okay, how do I break this down more easily so the layman can understand? It might have been the case that more people would be interested in philosophy. Oftentimes that's not the case. And the Black Ponder is all about trying to break down philosophy and its concepts to the modern layman. And that's what Stephen Mitchell is all about. So I applaud Stephen Mitchell for his effort in trying to get the meaning of what this book is all about to the modern reader. I think that's a great effort. And if you don't agree with that, there's other translations that are more direct to the ancient Chinese text, but they're going to be a little bit harder to get into because they're using really old school language. But if you're about that, then go ahead, check it out. So again, this is one of the principal texts of Taoism. So Taoism is in one of those ancient religions that originated in China. And it's separate from other ancient religions that originated in the Far East, like Buddhism or Hinduism. Although a lot of them, you see a lot of the same ideas be brought up. Taoism is separate. One of the things that Taoism is about is embracing opposites, and just looking at life as for the good and the bad, and for the light and the dark, and for this situation and the direct opposite of that situation, and just being in contentment and just accepting the world as it is. That yin and yang symbol, that originated from Taoism. Now, a lot of people, associate that symbol with martial arts, and a lot of martial arts experts take the idea of the symbol and apply it to their martial arts, but it's not all specifically about martial arts. It's about Taoism. A lot of people look at that symbol and they're like, okay, this symbol means within all good there is evil, and within all evil there's good. And it's broader than that. It actually is broader than that. We're talking more so about just opposites of any kind. Like within all dark there's light, and within all light there's dark. Or there's roughness and then there's smoothness. There's dryness and wetness. That the world is filled with opposites, and the key is to accept that as the reality of the world. And how should we best go about in this acceptance, this contentment? And that's what Tao Te Ching is one of the main focuses of this book. So let's talk about that. We're going to talk about that with some quotes that jumped up to me. So let's begin. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. Just an amazing quote, I think. For me, what comes from my mind from that quote is this whole idea of not knowing and not being able to understand everything. And sometimes, we struggle a lot to be trying to be experts at a certain thing, trying to understand things to its fullest. But sometimes we can be lost in that, actually. And what this quote is saying, I think, is like in some situations, in this state, this darkness, right? That's when you can start to begin to know or start to begin to understand. First is about not knowing. Like, okay, I don't know this. Now that you've accepted that, now you can begin to start to understand, okay, what is the full extent of my not knowing? What am I able to know? What am I able to not know? From this point, how can I move forward? Rather than kind of living in this false sense of reality where like, oh, I know everything. I'm an expert in this. Well, someday we're going to understand it all. We just got to keep trying and it's going to happen. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they're just things that you just don't know. And that's okay. It's okay not to know sometimes. And from there, from that acceptance, like, oh, you know what? It's all right. Then you can start to begin to understand what's really going on, if you get my drift. Let's continue and we'll try and move forward with this idea. The Tao is infinite. Why is it infinite? It has no desire for itself. Thus, it is present for all beings. The Master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. So the Tao in Taoism is like this flow, the way things are. That's like the essence that makes everything the way it is, right? In Taoism. And the Master is somebody who is one with the Tao, who's like come to accept this and come to understand this completely. So what this quote says to me is like, it's about this understanding that everything is kind of related to everything else. Everything is one together with this essence, this Tao. So when you desire, you have a desire, and you're just specifically desire in achieving one thing, one specific thing, you're kind of losing the whole point of life, really, because you have to really understand that everything is interconnected in some way. So in that way, if you just desire specifically just this one thing, whatever it may be, material or some relationship or something like that. I mean, relationships and things like that, and materials are important too, but what you really have to understand is like everything is interconnected. So don't be desirable about specifically one thing. Don't spend your entire life or a significant portion of your life pursuing one absolute goal, because you have to realize that everything is connected. And when you do that, when you just focus on specifically one goal, you lose yourself, because you're losing the reality of the situation, which is that one thing is part of everything. And really you need to detach yourself from specifics and realize that everything is whole. Let's continue. You can't know it, but you can be it, at ease in your own life. Just realize where you come from. This is the essence of wisdom. Again, it just comes to me. These quotes really sparked my interest, because oftentimes we kind of struggle with the idea that we need to understand something completely, and we kind of get in this turmoil, like, man, I just don't understand what's going on. What is going on? Whether it's a relationship, like, oh man, I really like this person, but I just don't understand what makes her happy. Or just, for example, the concept of love, right? Some people fall in love. It's like, man, I'm in love, but I don't understand it at all. I don't know how it works. And then people write all these self-help books and things like that. That's just one example. Other examples could be like the concept of the universe and the true nature of the universe. There's things that we understand, and there's some things that in my mind we're just not going to be able to understand completely, and that's okay. That's all right. Does that mean we need to stop trying to understand? No. But what that means is we just have to come to the reality that is a possibility. Same thing with, when I bring it back to the whole love thing. I love this person. Don't really understand why I love them, but I do. It is important to have some idea or understanding why you feel that way about somebody. But at the same time, don't be bogged down in complete understanding. Or like, just for example, life is another thing. I don't understand life. It's just so hard. It's so difficult. To try and completely understand life is impossible. Really, we have to accept the fact that there's some things that we're just not going to be able to understand, and that's okay. And once you get to that point, then you can get to the aha moment, like, oh, aha, I get it now. Things are the way they are because they are. So let's continue. This was a good one. Check this out. Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. The master sees things as they are, without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle. It's impossible to just control everything. Can't do it. The world is too complicated. There's just too many factors, right? The world is the way it is. And to try and think that you can control everything, and it might not even be the world. It might just be like, maybe you have a teenage son and he's just rambunctious and crazy. Now you could give him guidance. You can tell him something, give him advice. But in the end, you're not going to be able to completely control him. You're going to have to, at some point, accept him for who he is, right? And that's what it comes down to, really. Now, does that mean we shouldn't try to do good for people or to the world? Like, are you saying I should adopt some defeatist attitude? Oh, well, you can't control anything. Might as well stop trying. No, I'm not saying that, right? You should definitely try to help people out or give people advice. Try and make the world a better place. But what I'm saying is this: don't completely get into despair when things go out of control or when problems arise that are beyond your control. Don't specifically go into some sort of state of extreme depression. Oh, woe is me. life is not the way I want it to go. Things are just not how I planned them out to be. The world is a horrible place. Rather, try to do your best. And when your best is still not good enough, that's okay. That's okay. All you can do is your best. And you can't do more than that. People that say you need to give 110%, I disagree with that quote or that saying. Like, you need to go above and beyond. You need to break the limit. At a certain point, everybody has a limit. You can only do so much. So do what you can, help the world or help your relationship or do anything to the best of your ability. But understand that everything has a limit. You have a limit and you can only do so much. And if things are still not in the way you want them to be, then you need to come to terms with, okay, I guess this is just how things are. This is the way it is. Let me continue, because I probably didn't sway you yet to this idea. You're probably still thinking, oh, that's just defeatist attitude. You need to really fight toward controlling the situation the best way you can. And that's true. I do believe, if something's really wrong, and you do need to fight to make it right. But at the same time, there are just some things that are beyond your control. Let me continue with the quote. Whoever relies on the Tao in governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force there is a counterforce. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself. The master does his job and then stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of control, and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. I would like to say that again, that one part. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself. And isn't that true? Isn't that true when we go to wars, even though they're just? Even when that happens, always we get a ricochet effect. That always happens, does it not? That's why, I think people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or Cesar Chavez or Gandhi, they realized that. Like, they understood that. That's why they did this whole nonviolent approach. And did that ricochet? Did that rebound on itself? Was there any negative that came out of that? No. They understood, if you want to call it the Tao, you can call it that. But they were masters. Like, as it says here, the master does his job and then he stops. Dr. King, Gandhi, Chavez, they did their nonviolent protests. They did it against the law. They suffered legal consequences. They went through a lot of hardship and difficulty trying to fight the way they did. But they accepted that. They're like, the world is how it is, and I want to change it. But I'm going to do what I can, and that's all I can do. And they did change the world, but they did it in a way where they understand that the universe is forever out of control. And to try and dominate events goes against, really, reality. Really is that. That's what you have to really think about. So am I saying you need to adopt this defeatist attitude and stop fighting for the good of the world or fighting for your teenage son or daughter? If a relationship goes south, should you continue to fight to save your relationship? I'm not saying any of that, but just understand that the universe is forever out of control. There's always going to be hardship. There's always going to be difficulty. All you can do is your best. And when you're still suffering, even despite the fact that you're doing the right thing and you're doing your best, that is okay. That is okay. In fact, you are fighting the good fight. Let's continue with another quote. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her at all. Again, don't run away from difficulty or hardship, or when difficulty and hardship or struggle come your way, don't adopt this attitude like, oh, okay, something's wrong. There's a problem. There's an issue here. There could be an issue. There could be. But there could not be an issue as well. It is normal in life to struggle. In fact, that is, in my mind, part of the definition of life is to struggle. Part of life is to experience hardship. Also, if you want to do good in the world and you want to make the world a better place, you are going to struggle. You are going to face hardships. You are going to suffer. I mean, that is the very nature of doing something good in this world. That's how this world is. This world is chaotic, and if you want to make it better, you need to expect to have a struggle. But also, I mean, there's going to be good times too. From your struggle, there's going to be great things that are going to happen. But again, you got to accept the bad with the good. You can't make the world better without having to suffer. And once you realize that, come to that realization, then a problem isn't really a problem anymore. Rather, it's just something that comes with the territory, something that's expected. Like, you're ready for it, you know it's gonna happen, so you're gonna go through it. You're not trying to avoid it, you're not trying to make sure that it doesn't happen. You're gonna just head straight through it and face its full value, because that is part of life, that's part of existence. Check this quote out, another excellent quote. The ancient masters didn't try to educate people, but kindly taught them to not know. When they think that they know the answers, people are difficult to guide. When they know that they don't know, people can find their own way. If you want to learn how to govern, avoid being clever or rich. The simplest pattern is the clearest. Content with an ordinary life, you can show all people the way back to their own true nature. Isn't that interesting? I mean, to be quite honest with you, that brings me back to stories of religious people. People like Buddha or Jesus, right? They lived simple lives, meaning Jesus, he was a carpenter, right? Buddha, he traveled the world on foot, he abandoned his life of royalty, right? And by doing that, as the text says, by being content with an ordinary life, they were able to show people their true nature. Here's another point that speaks to me about this quote. There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. Okay, wisdom is the ability to know what you know and know what you don't know. It's that ability to tell the difference between the two. Intelligence is the level of how you can apply facts and knowledge. You can apply facts and knowledge at a very high level. But if you're walking around thinking you know something that you don't know, not only are you kind of making a fool out of yourself, really you're living in this false sense of reality, right? You're not living in truth. Ultimately, that's what it's about. It's about understanding truth, because then you could, again, I always restate this in videos that I do. Once you begin to understand the true meaning of things, of life, of existence, of the world, then you can start being able to really make a difference, doing positive change. And I think this book does that well. It tells you things that a lot of people don't want to accept, or it's hard for people to kind of grasp this idea that the world is always at a constant state of opposites, and it's chaotic, it's out of control, but that is a natural order of how the world works. And somebody who's able to do great things in life are people who understand this, who accept this, and based off that truth, build on better ways to live. And that's what the Tao Te Ching is for me. It could be many different things to many different people. Let's talk about it. I'm not a Taoist. I'm not an expert in this religion. That's fine. Let me know. Let me know if I got some things off. I probably did. But those are the types of ideas that sparked in my mind when I read that. And I'm sure there's all types of other things that could also be sparked if I were to reread this or go back to it, which I will do from time to time for sure. Let me know if you're a practicing Taoist and I'm off the mark. Tell me about it. It's all good. I like to be schooled. I like to learn. I don't know all the answers. I'm not a practicing Taoist. I'm a Christian, so I don't know. But it's all good. I think it's an excellent book, though. I think this is a very good read. I think any philosopher would do themselves a disservice not to read this book. Check it out. This is The Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Thank you for watching.